What's up YouTube, Winterguard here. So the open beta just finished and they added the Necromancer and the Druid to the character list for testing, and we played the Druid a little bit. Let's take a look and see how it went. Oh boys! So the second open beta just ended. We initially leveled the Necromancer. It was pretty enjoyable. I had a lot of fun with it, but I was hearing a lot of feedback about the Druid being not a lot of fun, kind of boring, a little underpowered, or a lot underpowered. So we decided to run the Druid up next. I went through leveling as I tried to do a sort of pure lightning build, which we'll get into. But I decided we'd take a look at all the elemental builds that have some potential and kind of go through those and kind of give my pros and cons of what I think about them. We did not have enough time to delve into the shape-shifting or feral build, however you want to call it, which included like bear form, werewolf form, those sort of things. There is the capability of potentially doing like a zoo druid build as well, which what I mean by that is kind of a summoner build. Since we're capped at level 25, we don't have a full idea of how these builds will scale. But I just wanted to give my thoughts on the initial elemental setups. So there's three different ones. Basically, there's a lightning, an earth, or a wind elemental build, or elemental types. So we decided to test one of each of these out. And what I did was I went through and did them as pure builds. So the way the Diablo IV tree is set up, you could potentially build these out as some of different hybrid setups, and which is probably going to be the most optimal way to do it. But I wanted to look at each one of the elements as their own standalone build. So let's take a look at these, and we'll kind of go through each one of them and see what we think. Okay, so let's take a look at lighting first. So the initial spirit generator is your Storm Strike, which basically it adds a lightning damage effect to your melee weapon. So this one you have to get in range for. This is not a spirit generator from range. You have to get in and smack mobs and build your spirit up that way. It does hit hard, and with modifiers you can immobilize, chance to immobilize. It can chain some lightning damage. It's fairly effective, so that one, it's okay. The damage is good. The only, again, downside to that is the fact that you do have to get in melee range to generate your spirit. After that, you go into Lightning Storm next. That's another lightning damage effect that you get in the second branch, which is a channeled effect, which again, you can't move while channeling this, but it's got a great AoE effect to it. It hits pretty hard. Again, downside to that is it is a channeling effect, so you have to kind of watch it when you're going to throw this around. But as you channel it, it does proc more and more lightning bolts, and you can modify it into strike lightning even after you stop the channel. So the modifiers are decent and the damage is pretty good, but it is not really a great single target damage effect, so that is kind of the downside to that. After that, we went into Cyclone Armor, which is in the defensive branch. You have a couple of options there, but I tried to keep it kind of in the same vein, being that it was lightning. Your other defensive skill could have been like Bulwark, but I figured with Cyclone Armor kind of played into the lightning overall lightning effect a little better, so we went with that. It does have a knockback effect, which you can proc. Unfortunately, it does have like a 15 or 18 second cooldown, so you have to watch when you're going to play that out. But it is a good one to use if you want to get yourself out of trouble and knock some mobs back off of you. From there, though, this is where going like a pure lightning build is not going to be that effective. The next branch, basically you could have enhancements to your lightning damage, but there's not an actual another attack in the next branch. So we basically just dump points into making the lightning hit harder, which is fine. I just felt like it would have been a little better to have a whole separate cooldown attack at that point, which you'll see in the other builds, which unfortunately lightning doesn't have. Now, for the sake of transparency, you're not going to probably do a pure build of any sort, like either lightning, earth, or wind. It's going to be, you're probably going to do a mixture of which one's best in each branch, and there are some standouts when it comes to which ones you pick. So that is probably going to actually be the true build, but it was kind of fun to try and do like pure builds in each element. The last branch you're able to hit with level 25, that's where I picked up Cataclysm, and basically it just throws a storm out. It's on a really long cooldown, which at this point, if you've played any of the D4 beta, you know that the last skill that you're going to pick up is going to be on a minute or greater cooldown, which I don't particularly care for, because some of them are not as strong as they probably should be if you're going to have that long of a cooldown. But we went into Cataclysm to kind of match the effect of lightning. It does throw a storm out, which there's some tornado effect in it as well as lightning procs, so that's where we dumped the last point. Overall, it was pretty fun to play. I actually leveled all the way to 25 playing lightning, and we really didn't have any issues getting through any of the fights. I did not try any of the world boss fights with this, though. I think these are probably going to be weak overall. Most of the effects that you get from this are kind of an AoE, not a single target, so they're probably not going to do that well in the world boss fights. But again, we're looking at level 25, and there's potentially some other stuff further into the trees that are probably going to be way better to kind of enhance that. But got to be perfectly honest, the people saying that druid was boring, I can't necessarily agree just from leveling with the lightning skills. And again, I could have optimized this to be way better, incorporating like the best from each branch. Okay, the next element we're going to get into is earth. Now this one was a ton of fun. There was one drawback to this that was pretty immediate, and you'll see, I'll explain it in a second. But overall, the damage was really solid, and it was just, the spell effects were great, and I really enjoyed this one way more than I thought I would, to be perfectly honest. So let's get into how we built this. The spirit generator that we get is Earth Spike. Now this is the worst part of this build, I would say. The thing with the spirit generator for Earth element is the fact that it's on a cooldown, which was kind of surprising to me. You have to, it's a 2-second cooldown. Of course, there's cooldown modifiers, but there's 2-second cooldown for the spirit generator, which, perfectly honest, it's horrible. I don't feel like there should be any sort of cooldown on the spirit generator. It should be spammable. But unfortunately, it is not for the earth skill, and it does hit fairly hard, and it has some great effects, like it has a stun modifier. I feel like it should be a spammable effect, since it's your basic attack, and you shouldn't have cooldown on a basic attack. But outside of that, the rest of the tree I think is pretty solid. You go into Landslide as your second attack. Now this is kind of your spirit dump. The only, I guess, downside to this effect is that its area of effect is kind of small. It hits really hard. That is obviously a positive for this. It does a ton of damage. The spirit cost is maybe a little high on it, considering that you have a cooldown on your spirit generator. But again, the damage is crazy good on that. And again, the only thing with that is that the area of effect is a little small to me. I feel like it should be increased a little bit to help with this build. Okay, for the defensive branch, we get into Earthen Bulwark. So this is basically a damage absorb on about an 18-second cooldown. I feel like maybe the Cyclone Armor is a little better out of the two choices here. Cyclone Armor can get you out of trouble with the knockback effect, I guess it's kind of a playstyle thing. If you want to just absorb damage and just keep going in, that's probably you'll probably like Bulwark better. The spell effect from it, the visuals, the graphics from it is actually really cool. I do like it. I'm more of I like the knockback effect from Cyclone, so I would probably play that over Bulwark, but it's definitely not a bad skill to take, because you could just stand and tank with that instead of trying to get away. So it's not definitely not a bad pick in my opinion. From there into the summoning branch next, we went ahead and did wolves, as I said before, so we won't spend any time on that. From there, the next spell effect, and this is where lightning didn't have one, but in this branch you can go into Boulder. So for those that have played D2R or D2, Boulder is the same as the Molten Boulder effect with the druids in D2. So basically, it's just a rolling boulder that pushes back enemies, does a decent amount of damage, can potentially stun as well, or slow, not stun, it's a slow. But it's another one that I've really enjoyed using. It's on, again, a little bit of a cooldown, 18 or 20 seconds, but definitely a good addition to the earth damage. Like I said, in old D2, this would have been a fire effect, but they don't have that in D4, so they replaced that with earth. But again, I enjoyed using that as a on cooldown. It does get you out of a jam because you can push a lot of enemies back with that. And the last one, and this is where, again, it's kind of a full build when it comes to earth, because the other skills they kind of have a little bit of crossover. And the last, like, I guess your ultimate for this would be Petrify, and this is basically an AoE effect around you, and with a pretty big radius that freezes everything in a stone encasement and holds them in place for 4 seconds. A couple of things with this: it's on a 60-second cooldown, but in this branch, all the I guess you'd call them ultimates have this long cooldown, but it does have the freeze stun effect. And if you use it on, you can't freeze bosses, but if you use it on a boss, it does give you a 50% crit chance on the boss for 7 seconds after that. So it is pretty useful in the boss fights to at least give you the crit damage chance. And on top of that, if you kill any of the normal mobs while they are petrified, it generates 25 spirit as well. So you can spam a lot of stuff while killing the petrified mobs. So decent ultimate. I liked it more than Cataclysm for sure, just because of the passive effects from it. So Earth is pretty viable if you wanted to do it as a pure elemental build. Again, there's probably some things you want to maybe switch out, like the spirit generator with the cooldown. I would probably pick something else in that spot. Outside of that, the other skill sets are pretty decent. And again, the spirit dump with landslide it puts out a lot of damage. So this is a really fun build if you want to mess around with a pure build. Okay, so the last build we're going to get into is Wind. So this kind of harkens back to D2 days, the Wind Druid, with some similar effects, being like the Hurricane and the Tornado effects, with a few additional items. Unfortunately, I feel like this is kind of weaker than I was expecting. It wasn't horrible, but I was fully expecting this to be the strongest build, and I don't think it truly is. So let's start off with Wind Shear. Now the Wind Shear basic attack, this is probably the best of the basic attacks in my opinion. It's a ranged one, you can spam it. It does decent damage. You can get a vulnerability modifier to it, which basically what vulnerability does is increase the damage taken by the target. The spammable spirit generator is actually really good if you go with the wind effect, which is Wind Shear of course. But from there, it kind of falls off to me. Tornado is the next, like the Spirit Dump. Tornado, I didn't particularly care for it. It tended to be a bit random in its pathing. I know that's kind of how it's supposed to be, but I noticed that tornadoes would kind of tend to be stuck against walls. If you're trying, you can't really cast through doorways with the tornado. They tended to just push up against the sides, and you really had to get into a room to spam tornado and be effective. I also noticed that sometimes tornado would spin behind you, which again, that's that randomness to it, but it tended to do that at the worst possible times. The damage is okay, and it also applies to vulnerability affected mobs, so that is pretty decent. The spirit cost of this is really high, though. Tornado tends to have like a 40 spirit cost to it, so you basically get 2 out before you're out of spirit and have to start spamming wind shear again. So it's an okay attack to me. If I were to do a hybrid build, I would not pick Tornado as my spirit dump. From there, we went into Cyclone Armor like we did with Lightning, so we're not going to get into that. And again, Wolves for your summon pets. We just kind of stuck with that through the elemental builds. So from there, we get into Hurricane, which is on a 18-second cooldown. It's got a AoE radius damage. The damage seemed underwhelming with Hurricane. I wasn't expecting it to just knock everything down, but I feel like it needs to be tweaked a little bit to get that damage up. It does have a slow modifier that you get, and again, it does have a vulnerability mod on affected mobs, so that's pretty decent. So you can, with all of them combined, you put out everything around you is going to be vulnerable for the most part. So in that aspect, it's the combined spell effects are pretty decent, but I feel like Hurricane needs to be bumped a little bit. And from there, we go into the same ultimate that we used with Lightning, which was the Cataclysm. Decent amount of damage. Again, this is your long cooldown spell effect, but that's pretty much for Wind. Out of the 3, Wind is my least favorite. Again, it has the kind of the lore behind it with the having the Wind Druids in D2, but I expected it to be a little stronger. And maybe that's just having the expectations set a little high. I feel like it can be tweaked a little bit. So hopefully they'll look at that and maybe from the beta testing and feedback potentially up some of the damage effects. And again, I mean, we don't know the full effect of once you get all your points into the various parts of the skill tree. Maybe it all synergizes in the end, but initial feelings for at least the beta test, the Wind was probably my least favorite elemental build. Final thoughts on the Druid. As far as elemental Druid, we didn't play Feral or the Shapeshifter build with the Werebear and Werewolf, but overall, it was a lot more fun than I was expecting. There was so many people saying how bad the Druid was when they released a beta that I wasn't sure what to expect, but to me, it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed playing it. Again, there were certain parts of it that I feel like could be tweaked, but overall, I find the Druid to be pretty interesting and a lot of fun. So hopefully they could build on that, and by the time we get to live, it'll be even better. So we'll see how that shakes out. And again, I mean, I didn't take advantage of a lot of the aspects that potentially could have gotten. I did have more aspects just from the playthrough with the Earth build. So we did have some aspects that we could use at that point. I had 0 for Wind, and I had a couple for Lightning. So maybe that was the reason why Wind was a little less effective to me. Maybe if we had some decent aspects, that would have been a lot different. And also, we got to take into consideration that what was not available in the beta was the fact that the Druids have boons that you could take advantage of. That when you get to, I don't know if it unlocks at a certain level. I didn't dig into it. I just know it wasn't available. The Druids are able to transport back or teleport back to their home world where they gain boons that enhance your builds or damage or whatever. I didn't look into what all is going to be coming from that. I don't know if there's that much information available for that. But that's another aspect of the Druids that we can't take into account with the beta test since it wasn't available. So, I mean, there's still a lot left to learn about the game and the different builds, but I just wanted to give my take on how I felt about the Elemental. Overall, it was fun. I enjoyed it a lot. I obviously had enjoyed one more builds over others. So we'll leave it here. If you enjoyed the video, hopefully we'll be able to put out some more videos as they release information or potentially what they might change based off feedback from the beta. I don't know if we're going to get another beta test before this goes live, which is currently slated for June 6th. So we'll see how it shakes out. Maybe they'll have another closed invite beta for endgame stuff. Maybe they'll do one PvP related. It's hard to say right now. For now, we're going to leave it there. If you guys enjoy this type of video, don't forget to leave me a like and subscribe. Discord link is in the description. I'll catch you guys later. Peace.